Tonight on Life on the Rock, we have Dr. Jonathan Reyes, I'll Give a Reflection, and much more. Welcome to Life on the Rock. Tonight our guest is Dr. Jonathan Reyes. He's been in the world of evangelization for a long time. He's got very profound thoughts. He's going to share those thoughts with us tonight.
And we're now going to a reflection with Father Mark.
Vatican II, in the document Gaudium et Spes, the Church in the Modern World, talks about the great dignity of man is in the fact that he is called to communion with God, that we're made in the image and likeness of God. We come from Him. He creates our soul in an immediate act of creation, and we're destined to be with Him. I mean, we take this revelation for granted, but if you look at like pagan religions throughout man's history, oftentimes God was an angry God, a vengeful God. In Christ, we see a loving God. He reveals the love of the Father towards us. He's merciful. He's forgiving. And the Christians are to be known and living that in the world today, to radiate that in the world today. But again, this desire for God is written in our hearts because we're made to be with Him, created by Him, for Him, and He never ceases to draw us to Himself. And He gives us the Holy Spirit to call us into communion with Himself. Satan brings division. That's what happened in the Garden of Eden. That after the original sin, we got divided within ourselves. We have a tendency to sin. We're divided between each other. There's mutual accusations we see between Adam and Eve. We see a division between us and the world. We live in a fallen world, and we know there could be terrible disasters, natural disasters. And we're separated from God. That beautiful scene where, God walks in the cool of the day, and He calls out for Adam, because He's used to being in communion with us. But we've had this fall from grace, and now we're divided. We're hiding ourselves, and He clothes us because there's this disorder within us. He makes us through love, in a sense we could say, and He holds us in existence by His love. And we're called to live in that truth that acknowledges His love and entrust ourselves to Him and to each other. That's our dignity. Communion with God and with one another. Well, Jonathan, welcome to Life on the Rock.
Thanks for having me, Father. Really great to be here.
Yeah.
Especially at Seek.
Seek, yes. You've been coming since 04, you said.
04 was my first Seek, yeah.
And I've heard your talks, at least one of your talks here, it was just so powerful. That's why I wanted to talk to you about. You gave a number of talks this week. You're giving a number of talks, and one is on masculinity. What are you going to different groups? You're going to talk to men about this. What is the overall theme of your masculinity presentation?
It's basically an invitation. It's basically telling men, you were actually made for a glorious purpose. You have a place and a plan for life. You were made in a way to achieve that purpose with God's grace. And so to aim high, I want to set their view on what God's view of what their life should be.
Right.
And then we start asking the questions, okay, so what's it take to get there? Uh-huh. What things do we need to overcome? Uh-huh. What misconceptions do we have? Yeah. But the key is to lay out to men, I think men, especially today, they don't know what their life is for. They're looking for purpose, they're looking for meaning. Yeah. They're the vast majority of deaths of despair of people precisely, young men this age. Mm-hmm. It doesn't make any sense. It's precisely when a young man should be aspiring to the greatness he's made for. Yeah. And so communicating that, I think, and giving them a vision for that is really important.
It's like they need a hill to take, right?
And to know they can take it both, right? Because it's that balance. It's in them. Mm-hmm. It's in every man's heart, especially at this age where you're longing to do something.
Right.
What though?
Right.
What? I mean, if the world's telling your life is just for pleasing yourself, that quickly becomes boring and frankly depressing.
Yeah. And how do you describe like that role of the laity? In particular for men? We talk a lot about feminine genius. How about the men's side of that?
Well, the completion of the male character. is fatherhood. And this too is something under attack in our culture. And so I think it's very important that we show them what it means to be representatives of the Father to the rest of the world. I think we have this conception that fatherhood is the result of having children. It's not. The fatherhood we are to obtain is because we represent our Father in heaven. So every man, children or no, is meant to be a father. And so I think we need to unpack that, because it's really hard to understand God, who is revealed to us as Father, and what it means for us in our mission if we don't get fatherhood right. And I think this is a space of great damage for young people, from their own experience, from misconceptions out there, the dumb father, the absent father, you know, and so restoring fatherhood is the ideal, I think, is essential for you.
Yeah. And it seems practically, I see a lot, it seems like fathers can, like our spiritual paternity, can give a wisdom to people, to help guide people, to help maybe introduce, mentor, show somebody, to introduce them to the big bad world out there, how to navigate that world and have that kind of wisdom and presence in their life.
I think you're exactly right. You know, the fathers do many things, but two of them that I think are very important is they establish a son in his mission, or a daughter in his mission, in her mission, excuse me. And so the role of a father isn't to do things for the young person, it's to set them up so that they can flourish in who they've been made to be. And I think the second thing fathers do, and our Father in heaven does it in the most fundamental way, names us, gives us our identity. And so you've got all these young men searching for, who am I? What am I for, and all that, because they haven't heard the Father's voice saying, let me speak who you are, let me name you. And the name the Lord gives is a name for mission. It's when he calls Peter, Peter, that's his name and his mission. And I think men need to hear, we think we create our own identity and it just makes us neurotic. We need to hear our identity. We were made in a particular way for a particular mission. And so having our ears open to that is very important.
I think John Paul II was so eloquent on speaking the role of the laity in their mission, you know, be on the front lines, to sanctify the temporal order. What are some of the things you tell men about that I've seen transformation in men, like they get married, they have kids, and all of a sudden they really care about what's going on in the neighborhood now, because their child's got to walk to the bus stop.
They've mistaken it, they've mistaken it.
But what do you tell them about, to maybe excite them about their role as a lay person in the world?
Well, one of the things this is going to sound weird, but one of the things I ask them to do is take a look at the world around them. Is it a happy place? Are people secure? Is there joy? Is it a place of peace? And one of the roles of a father, which is given from God, is to bring order to chaos. And I think one of the things young men can see, because they've experienced it in their own lives, and then when you're a young father, you see it and you're worried about your kids, is there's a heck of a lot of chaos. And the notion that as the Lord brought forth the world from the void, that we bring order into this, I think it catches their imagination. It says, that's what I want to do. I want to bring peace and order to the community around me, to my parish life, to my relationships, to my relationships with my brothers, to the families that I come to get to know. And they understand, they take a responsibility for it. And they say, this isn't just something that happens. This is something I need to help do my part in bringing to flourishing, to really impacting the world around.
I see that ability to guide, to sacrifice for the good of a greater group and things, you know, so intrinsic to fatherhood. You know, I recently they're releasing these new homilies by Pope Benedict that haven't been seen before. And I heard he said something about St. Joseph, and he was describing it. One was his ability to organize, He had to organize the flight into Egypt, say, or, you know, to get to Bethlehem, go to Egypt. And I never thought of that, but I guess how many rest stops are in Egypt as you're going out there? You know, you gotta have provisions and everything. And it was funny because on a particular day, I was very disorganized. I was like, great.
No, I think, and this is where one doesn't want to overstate these things, but men will bring order to a place, and women will make sure it's ordered in love. Because there's a flip side to bringing order,
right?
Which is you make order, but it's just making people march or do this. It's bad Captain Von Trapp, right? It's blowing a whistle. And so the way to bring the world to its fullness and the way the Lord envisioned it is ordered love. Ordered love. And so in essence speaks to complementarity, which also helps men. Right? And it also helps them to understand that and see that and awaken them to things like marriage in a way that's not just fulfillment or even just a good partnership. It's actually a mission.
All right. Well, we got to take a short break. We'll be back in just a moment with Dr. Jonathan Reyes. Well, Jonathan, you spoke to seminarians, or will speak at this week at Focus, and the title was, right, the cultural moment we're in and how to evangelize that. Can you describe that cultural moment?
Yeah, I think there's two ways to go at it. One is just like sociologically, and one is in terms of ideas. And the way I put it is, the church, particularly in the United States, is in a very different place than it's ever been. It was for many years an ethnic church, then it became very mainstream after World War II, and now it's being remarginalized again. And that's something we need to think about, because all the institutions we have and the way of doing things and organizing parishes were built either in that ethnic enclave or in that mainstream moment. And now we're in a completely different moment. We're carrying this church around and we're wondering, what does it look to make this thing evangelistic?
Right.
And this is talk about changing the gospel or anything. Of course, this is about how do we structure this? How do we do things? And Focus is one of those incidents of there's got to be another way to approach this. There's got to be new ways to go at this for this moment. So that's like one side. Then the other side is, I call it the religion of the day. And that is, for most of our history in the U.S., some version of Protestant Christianity was sort of what kind of guided us. It was the story that we told, and we may not have been faithful to it, and there was a lot of secular pieces, but that was sort of the roots, the Ten Commandments and other things. That's not only gone, it's been replaced. There is a new religion of the day. And part of what I try to do for them, as I said, if we take all the isms out there right now, and all the ideological noise, you really can reduce it to a different story. It's a salvation story, but it's not a Christian salvation story. And I think our culture is being grounded in, our institutions are being reworked according to, our politics is being reworked according to a new religion of the day. And I think it's very important that future priests, I think it's very important that everybody who has leadership in the church understands that. Right.
And like some of the principles of that new order?
Sure, it's a salvation story that goes something like this, and it sort of rhymes with the Christian thing, but then diverges, which is why it has certain potency. It starts with, hey, there's alienation and injustice out there. Something's wrong. And then it says, we need to fix that. There's got to be a future where this is better. And then that's a Christian story, but it's the in-between where they change it. So they don't believe in original sin. So that means that the problem's not sin, then what is it? Well, the problem is two things. It's the whole past and all this legacy structures it's given us. They're oppressive. They create injustice. And it doesn't matter which ideological school you pick from, they all tell that story. And the other problem is other people, because it's not me, because I see it. They're the problem, the ones who oppose my new vision. And what's this new vision? It's got its own story to tell. It's a vision of absolute freedom, so there's no limits on anything. It's a vision that needs to tear everything down and build something new. That's why revolution is the great tool, and protest, revolution, push back, take down. This is the language of this kind of revolution. And it promises,
sounds like Marxism a little bit there. That
Marxism is of this sort. It's really more Gnostic than that. It's something that's more, that would be sort of more secret knowledge about how to revolt, change the world. And it's really driven by technology too, because you can't imagine tearing everything down, rebuilding it, undermining every institution, including ideas about what a man is and what a woman is, unless you had the technology to pretend you could change those things. And so once we get that there's a whole different salvation story being told, and that it's really moving for people, because people experience alienation, they know they don't fit here, and they see injustice. If we're going to preach, we need to preach and understand we're preaching against a different story, not just against certain moral principles or against a mistaken idea here or there.
Right.
It's a different religion. And a book just came out called Religion of the Day, where a set of people have come together and tried to just reduce this to a consumable, simple way and talk about what do we as church do in response to that.
Yeah. Yeah, the technology piece is interesting because I sometimes I wonder, like, what is really unique about this time? And it seems like the technology piece is really unique. I mean, it's just been such an explosion with computers and everything. And I know growing up, I was in a very high-tech town, and it was like everything new is better. So whatever they're saying now is better than the past, right? We'd apply that principle to everything. And sometimes I think all the chaos, if we could just have some moral principles too to guide us to live by, it just seemed like it would, and we're never going to agree on that, it seems like, without evangelization, but it just seemed like the lack of moral principles and this dependence on tech and buying all in on just the latest is the greatest thing.
Well, yeah, I mean, the two religions are very different, so to speak. So Christianity certainly acknowledges technology and sees certain goods according to its principles. Yeah. But the religion of the day actually depends on it. It actually depends on using it to the maximum because it wants to deny nature. Yeah. So it's constantly pushing this sort of transhumanist. Yeah. We need it. Not just is technology a good or bad, it's actually essential to what we're doing because we imagine building a complete new world that's not dependent on stuff.
Yeah. I remember Pope Benedict said something, it's so simple, but it was something like, things are always going to go badly if we don't recognize sin, right? That, if the technology is not going to save us because we're sinners, it by itself. And
any version of reality that doesn't start with the problem here is it's going to turn into tyranny because you're going to want to keep forcing everything else to fit your mold. Right. And eventually when people push back or reality pushes back, the temptation is always to just use more force. Yeah. And this weird moment we're in. Yeah. Where we preach freedom, but there's a lot of an inclination to a certain kind of despotic forcefulness in the culture.
Because you got to bow down before this. We can't convince you or reason.
We can't convince you, so you got to get out of the way. Yeah. You're just an enemy. And this is the church is finding itself increasingly being put in that category of enemy for what we stand for. Yeah. And this changes how priests are going to live their priesthood. It's not Bing Crosby anymore, It's not the bells of St. Mary. It's not Fulton Sheen, And this is going to affect how people raise their families.
We got about a minute left. What advice would you give to preachers, like the priest in their preaching? What would you say? Because I know you're a great speaker.
Tell the Christian story. Like Monsignor Shea did last night. Tell the story. Locate people in fall, redemption, creation, fall, redemption. Retell it over and over again because they have a different narrative in their head. Yeah. Start there. Because if they don't see the world the way you do, they're never going to understand a particular point. Yeah.
Sounds very Augustinian, right?
Very Augustinian. Yeah. Very Augustinian.
Well, Jonathan, thank you so much for your work.
Great to be with you, Father. Thank you.
I love Dr. Jonathan Reyes' point about our culture and the church and history that, the Catholic culture was ethnic at one time and then it got more mainstream, he said, in World War II. And now we're getting sidelined, right? Yeah. Because there's a new religion on the block, a new secularism, so to speak. We did have, as Americans, we had largely, kind of a Protestant foundation and principles that we'd follow, but now that's pushed aside. God's not the focus, right? And this absolute freedom and license, we recognize injustices and things and alienations, so we hear that in the cultural elite, we need to change that, do something about it, but there's not a recognition of sin as being the problem. Right. That there's a right and wrong we need to follow, so just people become the enemy or structures become the enemy.
And I think the TV kind of really said it, but a lot of these changes in the culture deal with technology. Kind of what's new is better, and that's not necessarily the case. And a lot of times with the TV, the internet, social media, we've seen how that really impacts just the family life, individuals, to whole organizations. But I think, again, going back to just the role of men, fatherhood in particular, you know, they bring order to chaos. And when you're young, you need a lot of guidance. I think we can all relate to that in one way or another. And so I think just having just the strong, just that male figure of someone that can guide us, lead us, show us what is good from what is wrong, from truth, from error. Those are very important things we need clarity on, a lot of times just direction or some kind of explanation. And so again, a lot of times we're hearing so many voices out there in the world, some good, some bad, some neutral. But having just that knowledge of where to kind of steer our course ultimately to God, you know, it's a challenge today.
Right, we need both, obviously, men and women to rise up, and we don't have that many speakers on masculinity, so I liked his contribution, you know, among the different points he made about that, and, you know, giving a son their mission and their name and things, the identity.
Right.
And I think the technology piece too is like it can help us to live in this pretend world that even is like we're kind of abstracting from nature. We're getting away from a recognized human nature. And so there's no recognition of sin and the need for redemption and salvation and God's grace. If we don't get those pieces, nothing's really going to go right.
Right.
So we need that. We need to be out there professing the faith, teaching it, preaching it, proclaiming it from the rooftops. May our Heavenly Father shine His face upon you. May He give you His peace. May He enable you and strengthen you to be evangelizers in this culture today. May God bless you, Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. We'll see you next week on Life on the Rock.